channel Tutelage, a guide to economics. Here, this is Shripana. Hope all of you are doing good. We had discussed in my previous session the concept of continuous and discrete variable and their differences, various methods of collecting primary data, and the statistical inquiry stages. So, today we will explain another some concepts under this chapter. So that's why it is called the collection of data part 3. So if you have missed my last session, so please go and check my description box and my first comment where the previous video's link is already shared. So learner, let's start the discussion and go to the next slide. And here we can see some concepts which we will discuss today. The first one is the concept of secondary data, which we have already discussed in my previous session. The second concept, that is sources of collecting secondary data, and third one is methods of data collection. So learner, let's begin the session and move on the next slide. So here this is a slide for sources of data. We all know that statistical data can be classified as two types. The first one is a primary data and second one is a secondary data. So we have already discussed what do you mean by a primary data and what are the various methods of collecting primary data. But today we will discuss briefly the second one, that is the secondary data. So let us explain. So now move on the next slide. Here this is a slide for secondary data, and so learner, what do you mean by a secondary data? Secondary data are such numerical data which have previously been collected by some agency and that are merely compiled from that source for a different uses. Here, so that means that secondary data is collected by some individual and then it is stored. After a few days, it is used for a different purpose or different reason. Clear? So, for example, when the census data contained in other publication, when census data the census data is collected by government, so which is known as a primary data example, but when it contained in any other publication for different research thing, so that time this data is known as secondary data. Clear? So now move on the next slide. So here we can see the sources of the collecting secondary data, and we can see there are two sources. First one is a published sources, and after that we can see the second sources, that is the unpublished sources or records. So at first we have to explain the published sources one. Okay, so now this is the slide for published sources. Okay, so the first published sources, one, the government publications, that means the economic survey. Second one is a semi-government publication. Third one is a reports of commissions and committees. Fourth one is a publication of the international organizations. Fifth one is publication of the research institutions like National Council of Applied Economic Research. Sixth one is publication of the trade bodies like stock exchanges, and last but not the least, that is the journal and newspaper and annual reports of joint stock companies. So there are 7 published sources of collecting secondary data. First one is government publication, second one is a semi-government publication, third one is a reports of commission and committees, fourth one is a publication of international organizations, fifth one is a publication of research institutions like National Council of Applied Economic Research, sixth one is a publication of the trade bodies, and last one is the journals and newspapers and annual reports of joint stock companies. Clear? So now going to the next slide, and where we can see unpublished records of collecting secondary data. So or unpublished sources also. Okay, so all statistical data need not be published. there are certain unpublished data in the form of internal records, okay, in the files of government. Okay, so this may be available with many research institutions, research scholars, trade institutions, chamber of commerce, etc. So that means unpublished sources is stored in the form of internal records, okay, and these are used for different inquiry, different research by different research institutions, individual scholar, trade associations, universities, and chamber of commerce. Clear? So I think it is clear to everyone. So now going to the next slide, and where we can see the different methods of data collection. So there are two method. The first one is a census or complete enumeration, and second one is a sample survey method, and we will explain both methods of data collection briefly in the next slide. So now move on the next slide. So we can see the method of data collection, that is the census or complete enumeration. Okay, so in this method, information is collected from each and every member of the population. So at first we have to know, what do you mean by a census? Census is basically a survey method which is conducted on the whole population, and it is held every 10 years. Why? Because it helps to count the whole population. So in statistics, that very much popular words are that is population and sample. Okay, so at first we have to know, what do you mean by a population? So population consists of all members of a specified group. It means a whole thing. Clear? So census method is under the population word. So now going to the next method, that is the sample survey method. So now move on the next slide. So here this is the slide for sample survey method, and sample survey method consists of two words. The first one is a sample and second one is a survey. So what do you mean by a sample? So sample is basically a subset of population. Clear? What is sample size? So now going to the meaning of survey. So survey refers to many different techniques of observations. And why we use the survey? Because it is used to gather knowledge about research. It's a process of selecting and surveying individual from the whole population. Clear? So sample survey method depends on the sample size, and census method depends on the whole population. That is the basic differences between the census or complete enumeration method and sample survey method. And nowadays, so we used sample survey method for data collection of research because it is economical, it is cheaper than the census or complete enumeration method, and it is a time saving method also, and it has accurate and uniform data. Okay, so I hope which is clear to everyone. So learner, we are done for the today's session. In this session, we have discussed the sources of data and the definition of the secondary data and sources of collecting secondary data, methods of data collection and their explanation. So I think it will be very helpful to everyone. So I will be back again with a new session. Till then, stay tuned. Please like, share, comment to my videos, and do subscribe to my channel. Thank you.